So first of all, I would like to really say a big thank you to Sarah and Elliot from the team of Paris who made this happen, and of course to Lisette also and all the Peruvian local team, without whom we could not do this. So I need the. Does it work? Perfect. It's not my presentation, but I will still start. So I got a bit scared when I saw the title of the presentation, not because it's, well, a little bit because it's scary to talk about in front of so many people, but also because I truly believe that it's not possible to predict the future based on past trends. So I mean, already I totally agree with what Gonzalo said this morning, what Lauren said also yesterday about the fact that some technologies progress with an exponential trend, which is not so easy for humans to integrate. But I think I would go beyond that, and I think that no model, no mathematical function whatsoever, linear, exponential, or etc., can help us to understand, predict the future based on the past. So I think it's because of like two major things. Well, that's two examples, but because of disruptions or convergence of trends, what the past trends can totally change. So disruptions. That will be a radical change of the parameters or of the rules that define reality. So I will give an example later. And the convergence of the technological or societal trends, it's the fact that maybe two trends together, they will create synergies that were really hard to anticipate as well. So first, an example of a disruption. So I will talk about CRISPR-Cas9, which is a truly disruption in the way we do genetic engineering. So before, the way we could add a new gene in a plant, in a living organism, was literally to use a gun to bombard the leaves of the plant, here for example, with small particles of gold coated with DNA, hoping that out of the thousands, millions of cells that get like fired by those particles, a few would have integrated the gene in the DNA without totally breaking the functionment of the cell. So it's a really like kind of random approach. It still worked really well because we made lots of progress, of course. But in comparison to that, CRISPR, it's totally different. It's a totally different approach. It's not an incremental amelioration of the previous technology. It's using molecular scissors to really cut the DNA exactly where we want, to be able to replace it, to replace a small portion by the right gene. So it's really more precise, and it allows application in many sectors like medicine, of course, but also agriculture, in energy, even in many sectors that we could not think of before. By predicting the evolution, linear or exponential or whatever, of the previous technology, we could not anticipate those applications. So an example of the convergence of the technologies, it's how we discover new drugs. So let's say the traditional way is to look into traditional medicine, see which plants they use, and then to discover in those plants which is the molecule that has the effect that we are interested in. And then we try in the lab to synthesize those molecules. and to produce it massively. Then we would do some clinical trials and so on. But with machine learning, so it's the convergence between biology and machine learning, we're able to go through all the data from all the past clinical trials. So the data about the shape, the 3D shape of the molecule, about the effect on the patients. We run algorithm, and those algorithms will find out some trends, some patterns that we could not discover without those technologies. And then those patterns, those algorithms will be able to suggest new molecules that we could not have been think about before. So those are two examples that shows that it's not possible. Again, I insist on that, to predict the future based on the past. So then the question is, how do we do it? Because it's really important to have an idea of what's happening next, because we need to make decisions about our job, our business, if we run a company, about our life, about the life of our children. So how do we do it? How do we know what's coming next? So our answer, it's really simple. It's that the future is already here. It's already here. So instead of looking ahead, instead of looking in front of us, the idea is to look around, because it's already here, but it's hidden. So let's just look around and find it. So it's already here in all the startups that have been pitching yesterday at the CERN, of course. So the point is really to find those startups. That's actually what Hello Tomorrow is about, to discover those projects in labs, in incubators, whether they are on the other side of the planet or in Lima, and to unveil them to the world, and to support them by connecting them to investors, to corporate leaders, and so on. It's already here also, not only in startups and in labs, but probably in the person sitting right beside you. Maybe this person has an interesting vision, and that's also why that's also what Hello Tomorrow is about. It's about gathering pioneers from different backgrounds, from academia, from business, from the government, students, senior people, so that all together we create this future. So that's also what Hello Tomorrow is about. So I will still, even if I say that we cannot predict the future, so I will rely on what we see in the startups in the Hello Tomorrow community. So more precisely, I will talk about a few examples of the startups which apply to the challenge this year in 2017. So it's a quite new batch of startups. So I don't really know all of them, but I will try to still give you an idea of what's coming next in several sectors. So first, in the energy sector. So I hope, no, well, it's okay because I will tell you anyway. So one important trend in the energy sector, so here it's the second one, it's the fact that renewable energies are getting cheaper and cheaper. So we all have those curves in mind with the solar energy going like almost below the grid price of electricity. So the core technology of photovoltaic and wind energy are already quite known. So what the startups are trying to work on, it's more incremental innovations that helps powering this price decrease, that help riding down the learning curve this way to reach grid parity. So for example, there is one startup adding semiconductor particles in the traditional silicon cells to allow those cells to increase the range of light that they can convert into electricity. Another startup is having the same objective, so to increase the range of light that can be converted into electricity, so eventually increasing the efficiency of the solar panels. But they do that by like using one traditional layer of silicon, like in traditional solar cells, and another layer of perovskite, so another semiconductor material, but which will convert another type of light. So that's an example to help decrease the price of photovoltaic energy. To enable this transition to renewable energy, it is also very important to have energy storage and smart grids, because with the traditional mix with coal and gas and nuclear, you can easily turn off and on your power plants to adapt the offer of energy to the demand. But you cannot choose when the light will shine and when the wind will blow. So we need to find a way to store the energy when there is a lot of light, but you don't really need all that energy, to then be able to use it at night, or when you come home and it's at night and you need to warm up your houses and so on. So there are many large companies, of course, but also many startups working on a new way to store energy. It can be, well, the traditional way is to store it with hydro energy. So you pump the water, you put it on top of the mountain, and then you can use it in the to produce electricity, or by compressing air. But you have many startups who want to find what will be the solution for tomorrow, for 2050, since we talk about 2050, and especially for the battery. Today, almost all the batteries of your phone, of your computer, are made out of lithium-ion technology. So we don't have the candidate yet. Maybe it will still be dominant for decades again, but a lot of startups are working to take the technology developed in the labs with different metals and ions, or with carbon, or with air, or with solid state lithium ion. So I will not go into the details because I would get lost anyway. But the point is, there is a huge effort to find other way to store energy. It can be also with hydrogen. So instead of having a battery in your car to fuel your electric car, you could have a tank of hydrogen, and then with a fuel cell, you turn this hydrogen into electricity, which will then power your car. So a lot of startups. There is one, for example, one startup from France, which is working on a new way to compress hydrogen, because that's a part of the barrier is the way we turn hydrogen into electricity, but also the way we manage to compress hydrogen that's in the air into tank and purify them. And they are using a new way of doing that with liquid metals and electromagnetic field that will move this liquid metal to compress hydrogen. And that's what they say, but they already have a proof of concept. They managed to reduce divide by 3 the price of a hydrogen compressing station, so it could enable electric cars in the next years or decades. Another very important topic in the energy transition is how we provide electricity to everybody. So to a remote village in Peru, or in this case, in the case of the startup I'm thinking about, it's in Africa. the problem there is there are two problems. First, it's off-grid, so it's not connected to the electric grid. And the second problem is that the people there, they have enough cash to live for 2 or 3 days, but they really live day by day. I mean, they are not able to afford an upfront investment to buy a large battery or to buy solar panels or so on. So the solutions that this startup found it's quite low tech. I mean, it's just combining technologies that already exist. So it's having a station with a solar panel, and people can go and plug their small battery to the station and use their mobile to pay for maybe 3 hours, 10 hours of electricity. And then they go home and they use this battery to cook, to turn out the light, and to enable the children to study, for example. And maybe 2 days after, when they run out of cash, they come back, of light, of energy, sorry, they come back and they charge the battery again. And so I'm talking about this solution. I think it's a different topic, but quickly, it's very, I mean, the local conditions are very important also for innovations, and the local challenges, difficulties, or culture, or talents. And in this case, in Africa, there is a lot of pay-as-you-go solutions. I mean, everybody is paying with a mobile, much more than in Europe, for example. And there is this issue of not having enough cash for the upfront investment, and these together, so those local conditions gave birth to really interesting innovations, and it could also be applied elsewhere in Europe, for example. So that's why we are really interested in Hello Tomorrow, also in local conditions and what's going on locally in every corner of the world. So to go back to the trends. So let's go to food and agriculture. So eating insects, it's an interesting example that illustrates the fact that the future is already here, because eating insects might really not seem the future for some people here. I mean, I've been spending a bit of time in South America in general. I mean, eating insects, it's normal. It's not something crazy as it can be in Europe. So it's an example that by looking what's going on, what's happening here, we can see some solutions for tomorrow, because we have these issues of how we have enough proteins without like keeping breeding feedstock, breeding cows, sheep, and so on, which are, I mean, pretty bad for the environment and not very efficient in terms of energy, water you use for the protein you need. So there are a lot of startups also working on like breeding insects on industrial scales. And for now, it's mostly to use that in animal farming, because people are not really ready yet to eat insects. But it starts to be in the culture. It starts to be in the habits, more in the form of chocolate bars, for example, enriched with insect proteins. But maybe soon we will see people in Europe eating insects as well. Another important trend in agriculture is so we heard about precision agriculture yesterday. I mean, I'm not going to say many things new about agriculture, because we covered the topic quite extensively already. But there is this example of a startup who built like a robot that so it goes in the field, and it scans the plants with a camera. And then with image recognition algorithm, so using machine learning, artificial intelligence again, they are able to instantaneously find out which plant is a weed, which one is the good plant, I mean, the algorithm are not processed in the robot, but the robot is connected, so it's cloud computing, so it's intelligence, artificial intelligence as a service. And then the robot is able, like when it, like just in the same time, to project some pesticides only on the plants you want to kill. So it's very, I mean, it's quite important because it allows first to reduce the utilization of chemicals, which are pretty bad. I mean, if they are used massively for the farmer's health, and it also allows to reduce the resistance of the weeds and the plants to the chemicals, because we use way less chemicals. So another trend is the use of microalgae, so more precisely spirulina. So many startups are working on spirulines. It's crazy. They all have their little technology or little specificities that enables them to target a niche market, or to be a bit more efficient, or to have like a specific vitamins or molecules that will be produced in those algae, it's for now we don't really see spirulina massively produced in the market, so it's not the future yet, but it's already happening, and it's gonna come soon. So I won't spend that much more time on food and agriculture, and let's go now to mobility. So everybody knows about autonomous vehicles, and the issue for autonomous vehicles is to enable the cars to know all the time where it is, and also, of course, to have sensors that knows all the time what's around. So geographical positioning and sensors like lidars, radars, and of course also the artificial intelligence that will allow the car to make the decisions. So one example of a startup working in this field is it's a quite interesting approach. They map all the roads of a region. So they will scan all the roads, and they will like a fingerprint. I mean, the pattern of the road is different everywhere. And then with a camera that's below the car, that is also filming the road, they will be able to match this small portion of road with the database, and then the car, even if there is fog, even if there is no connectivity or whatever, there is no GPS, the car will be able to know exactly where it is in this region. So another example of in the mobility sector, or what's coming next of what the startups are building. It's one startup is we would not think about it, but because it is working on engines, so like classical engines. They have been in the market for I don't know, like a long time. And so we could not think that a startup is trying to make a new engine, because car manufacturers have been doing that for a long time. But with the new materials and some new technologies, there was one startup which is able to design a new type of engine. It's still very expensive, and it's still not as efficient as traditional ones, because traditional ones have benefited from a lot of experience. But it could be a disruptor someday. Maybe someday, if we produce it enough, it will reach the price of and the efficiency of actual engines, and have a better potential for the future. And another startup doing something a bit crazy, but who knows, that might also be the future, is building solar roads. So they basically turn any road into a solar panel. So you can imagine that combined with electric cars and so on kind of makes sense. And if they manage to reach a price that's not too expensive, that would be profitable for in the markets. It could also radically change the way we think about how we distribute the energy, how we produce the electricity, and mobility in general. Then there is also some, for those who travel a lot, who take a lot of planes, there is a startup working on a cloud system for the passports, so that you don't have to wait in lines for hours and eventually miss your flight, especially if you have a stopover in the US. It's not a breakthrough technology, but in terms of usage, in terms of experience of the travelers, it could be a real breakthrough. Then, if we talk about environment, as for electricity, there is one very important topic, which is, to provide natural resources, not only energy but water, for example, for everybody. And there are at least one startups I can think of who is developing a kind of similar solutions to what the other one was doing with energy. So they have in remote villages, they have a kind of small decentralized wastewater treatment station. And there is, with a pay-as-you-go model, everybody can go and pay with its mobile for 2 days of fresh water without having to go to a supermarket or whatever. It made me think also about the startup Lauren was talking about yesterday, doing desalination with a small portable device powered by solar energy. And there is one startup this year doing the same thing, not for desalination, but for water treatment in general. So you can have your small device, and just with the light of the energy, you could purify any water you can find. Then there is in air quality. We need to treat and monitor air quality. And there are some startups also launching satellites. So it's I find it quite crazy, because we would think that sending a rocket into the space, sending satellites, it's really governmental agencies or huge corporations who can afford that. But there are more and more startups who launch satellites that can be as small as a backpack, for example. And this one has a small satellite with cameras, with specific cameras, which are able to track emissions of greenhouse gases, specifically methane. And so they sell the access to their database, so tracking all the emissions in the whole world. Well, for now in specific region, but soon in the whole world. And it can be used to track if there is a leak in industrial factories, for example. Or it can track if some companies are emitting more greenhouse gases than they are allowed to by the public government, and so on. There are also many solutions to capture the CO2 in the air and to turn it into something that we can store. For example, there is one startup who designed some heaters that you can have in your home that also will capture the CO2 and store it in small plastic balls, and then you can ship they will also pick up those balls, and then they can reuse the CO2 because it can be used as a resource as well. For example, to grow plants in greenhouses, this CO2 can be useful. And there is also another startup which turns the CO2 that gets out of your car into ink. So, I mean, it's not something that will really stop climate change because it would have a small impact. But what's more interesting is maybe more the message that it sends. It's like through pieces through art. So you have artists that use basically CO2, so pollution, to create some piece of art. And then when people see it, it really, I mean, they really question themselves. They see concretely the pollution into a piece of art. So it's a good way also to sensibilize people, even if it will not solve major problems. It's an important aspect as well. And last, I will talk a little bit about healthcare. So, of course, like very, very important. So, what's going on in healthcare? I talked briefly about what's going on in drug discovery with the convergence of machine learning and biology. And there is also an interesting approach to drug discovery, which is to model an entire cell. So it's like using new computational power. Now some people are able to build a model of a cell with like all the interactions. It's very complex, but all the main interactions within this cell. And then instead of doing clinical trials to test some molecules, at least they plan to use this model to go quickly, I mean, to go faster and to avoid all the clinical trials. And then there is also some smart devices, so connected devices that could increase all the patient's life. For example, there is like when you have the diabetes, when you know like this this disease where you need to measure all the time the level of sugar you have in your blood. There is a startup which will really help those people's life. They designed some lenses that you put even if you don't need lenses. I mean you can wear them that track all the time, so live your level of glucose in your blood, and those lenses are connected to your smartphone, so you can get a notification when your level of sugar is too low or too high. So you can imagine the change it can bring in those people's life. Then you have also using virtual reality. You have like a startup again, which is developing a new way to help people who have like a mental disorder, mental dementia, which is a growing problem with the population, which is aging a lot, at least in Europe. So it's a kind of game, but this game is designed so that the actions that the patient does will slow the development of the disease. Then you have, I talked a little bit about CRISPR also before. So there is a lot of approach growing, emerging based on synthetic biology, thanks to this new way of doing synthetic biology that could replace the painful chemotherapy, for example. And the last trend I will talk about, it's the way we deliver the drug. So sometimes, I don't know, if you want to treat something that's going on in one specific vein in your arm, for example, for now you use a big needle and you inject the drug in your arm. So it goes, in a big region. So it's painful. It's not efficient. And now, it's still in a lab, but it's they plan to create a startup with this technology. Some people build some like nanobots that can go in the specific region where you need the drugs to be delivered, and with micro needles, they are able to deliver the drugs exactly at the place where it needs to be delivered. So I hope I didn't lose everybody with this long list of applications. And I hope that, that you are convinced that the future is indeed here today. And I hope also that you understood that's the goal of Hello Tomorrow. So of all of us, because Hello Tomorrow, it's before anything else, it's the community of the people belonging to Hello Tomorrow, that its purpose is really to identify this future, identify those projects, whether they are in a lab, they are in a university or anywhere, and to unveil them to the world, and to also to help them by connecting them with the right people. And that it's also the connections. So it's also the fact that that you are here today together, for example, and that through conversations, opportunities will be created. Yesterday we have been talking a lot. We have heard a lot about the fact that nobody can achieve anything alone. So we really truly believe that, and that's really why we create this community. Thank you.